Well, hello and welcome back to Read Becca. It's time once again for my weekly chatty catch up on everything I've read, everything I'm currently reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading, as well as some general lifey chit chat and catch up on my week. And this week was a good reading week. The things I finished, I think, were pretty on track for things I had planned, but a lot of what I'm reading right now was not in the plans at all. So I'm a little all over the place this week, but that's fine because we're enjoying our reading. And that's what is the goal, right? So let's start with the thing that was a really big hit, a bigger hit than I expected even, and that is Furthermore by Tahereh Mafi. I read this for middle grade March. I got it in just at the line of March, and this was so great. Really, really good. So this is fantasy, obviously, and you can see this gorgeous cover. It's a lovely physical object. There's also quite a bit of art inside the actual book, all black and white drawings, and the chapter breaks are really gorgeous. They make it feel very whimsical and have little quotations that are funny and quirky. But this is a fantasy novel taking place beginning in Farrenwood. So that threw me a little bit because this is Furthermore, and Furthermore does not appear for a little while. But in Farrenwood, everyone is very magical and everything is brightly colored because it's imbued with magic somewhat. And our main character does not have magic. And she, Alexis Queensmeadow is her name. She has always lacked color and has white hair, white skin, and has hidden deep down that she does sort of have an ability, and the only person she's exposed that to is her father. And he encouraged her in her ability, but there are things about her ability that sort of made her want to hide it for certain reasons, because she feels separate and other. And so I feel like that was explored really beautifully and subtly. It's not hammered in your face through the novel, but it's very present if you're looking for it, I think. And so once everyone in Farrenwood hits a certain age, they have to demonstrate their magical ability, and then they're assigned a big quest, a task, where they sort of surrender the use of their magical ability to the collective group by doing this task. And she struggles with that because she doesn't want to expose her actual magical ability, though we're not really talking about that in the book at the point where that happens. She instead just simply demonstrates something that is different, that is a common ability. And so her trial doesn't go the way it's expected to. Now, along the way, she has also come back into contact with a boy she really doesn't like, who is a little bit older than her, and thankfully this is not treated romantically whatsoever. It never turns into a flirtation, but they are sort of thrown together for reasons, mainly because her father has disappeared in the past, over a year ago, and she loved her father and had this amazing connection with her father, while her mother was a very distant person in her life. And so she is longing to find her father and doesn't know what's happened, and Oliver, the boy, says he knows where her father is if she just will help him. And that's what sets them on the quest into Furthermore, which is a even more strangely magical world than Farrenwood. So they're going through sort of a magical doorway into another world, but this world is a series of worlds. It's a sequence of different communities with different rules. Everyone has very rigid and strict rules that they could die if they go wrong. So it reminded me immensely of things like The Phantom Tollbooth or A Wrinkle in Time, where you have that dynamic both of the nonsense worlds that have rigid rules and a lot of threat, and the hunt for her father, the search. So they journey through this magical world, and that's the main part of the story. But of course, there's all this depth of her interrogating who she is in relation to her community and the rules of her own society, her relationship with Oliver and their friendship. She is very contentious with him. She really doesn't like him. And so that leads to some things that kind of grated on me because she just doesn't want to trust him, doesn't want to ever have any good feelings for him, and that was a little frustrating because he seems very genuine throughout, and I couldn't understand the barrier that she was having. And they do eventually develop into friends, and so I appreciated that progression toward friendship and trust. And I think that was the value of setting it up this way. So there were a couple of things there that were very clearly middle grade, but didn't quite grade on me in the way that I think commonly they are delivered in middle grade. It felt very mature in the nuance that it was delivering, and I feel the writing also aided in that because the writing is so gorgeous. This feels much more like a fairy tale or folklore in the way that it's delivered, where it's kind of dreamlike, rather than a traditional simple narrative. And some of the writing is just so poetic and beautiful. I think that in general, the descriptions are just broadly really, really gorgeous. So like a description of the morning. The morning arrived the way Alice imagined a whisper would, in tendrils of gray and threads of gold, quietly, quietly. The sky was illuminated with great care and deliberation, and she leaned back to watch it bloom. Love it. Just a beautiful description. But then there's also more introspective ways of reading some of the passages where there's deeper meaning and there's poetic wordplay. Her oddness was evident even in the simplest things she did, though most especially in her inability to walk home in a straight line. She stopped too many times, wandering off the main path, catching deep breaths and holding them, too selfish to let them go. She spun until her skirts circled around her, smiling so wide she thought her face would break and blossom. She hopped around on tiptoe, and only when she could stand it no longer would she exhale what wasn't hers to keep. So I love that duality about breath and catching deep breaths and holding them, too selfish to let them go, but then only when she could stand it no longer would she exhale what wasn't hers to keep. So the idea of stealing by holding in your breath. It's just really beautiful. So this felt like it had a nuance and maturity to it while still being really appropriate for a young reader. So I am thrilled to have read this. I really enjoyed it and thought it was gorgeous. And I'm looking forward to reading the other of this duology, Witchwood, which I also have and put on my TBR as well for Middle Grade March, but didn't quite get to it. So I will definitely be following up very soon. The other thing that I read was Touch Not the Cat by Mary Stewart with Dia from Novel Idea. This was continuing on our enjoyment of Mary Stewart. We buddy read Thornyhold last year and both really enjoyed it. And this one is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. So I would say Stewart writes some of the same elements, definitely, but where Thornyhold was a romantic suspense that feels very whimsical and positive and hopeful, this was very insidious and really dark and gothic. And it feels very much like it's set on the moors. It feels very grimy a little bit. It's this old manor house that's really run down rather than her cheery cottage in the previous one. And this one we have so many insidious characters as well. We have a pair of twins, which immediately when they're introduced, you know that they have twin shenanigans going on. But also our main character, Bryony, she is cousins with these twins, and they all have a lineage back to the Ashley family, who are the wealthy former owners of this now rundown mansion house. And she's come to live in this cottage, but there's also a maze, again, on the cover. I will probably end up just putting in a picture because you won't be able to see this very well. There's a maze that's very central to all of this, and it's also run down, and there's a pavilion at the center. And things start disappearing there. Items are disappearing from the manor. Her father has recently died, and that's what called her back to this manor house, that she now has inherited his cottage, and the twins are interested in having some claim on things there as well. And there's just so much drama and reason to be suspicious about many, many things. But through all of this, Bryony has had a voice. She doesn't know if it's a ghost or a living person or what, but she's had a psychic lover. She calls it her lover since she was young, that has been talking to her internally. And apparently this is something of their lineage. Their family have this ability where they have sort of psychic powers. And everyone seems to just accept that. Like, it's very, very strange. Or they think it's all very, very normal. It is very, very strange to me as the reader. So there is certainly a weird paranormal element. But through that lineage, obviously we're sort of finding out what is the connection back to that past and what's going on there, because we have the family swarming around with these two very suspicious twin guys who are increasingly very insidious and dark people. Like they manipulate a lot and exploit a lot. And Bryony is so naive. I really struggled with her as a character because she's in her young 20s, I think, and just always is looking for the good in people, even when there is no reason whatsoever to think that about multiple people in these situations. So because of her psychic connection voice, she knew her father was in a bad situation shortly before he died, before she'd gotten the news. And so that was item number one. And then the other thing is that things are just not lining up. And she's getting increasing connection with this voice that aren't lining up with things that are happening. And these items disappearing are setting her to start looking into it, and items around the manor and her own personal things. And so as she's looking into it, she's uncovering this backstory that also weirdly connects to Romeo and Juliet. And I never really got why that was important, but this is a little convoluted, I think. However, all of that said, Bryony I didn't totally buy into because of her level of naivety and her going along with so many things that were just questionable, deeply, deeply questionable. And I never bought into that. And yet, Mary Stewart made me just really enjoy reading this book. She's such a wonderful writer. And much like the last book, the writing about the scenery and setting and place is beautiful and gorgeous, even though it's this dark, gritty manor house and it's just crumbling. And yet everything that's described is just so beautiful and evocative, and you feel like you're there. So while I don't feel like I liked any of the characters, and I was so frustrated with Bryony and the characters I really didn't like, I think that I really liked the book. And that's a very strange feeling, but I think that's just the power of Mary Stewart, really, and is exactly why we were continuing on with this buddy read, because Stewart is just someone you can put your trust in, I think, to write a really enjoyable story. I think that's it for the book. However, the title, I was highly disappointed. Touch Not the Cat is part of the family motto. There is not actually a cat involved in the story, and that was heartbreaking. I was hoping for magical cats. No magical cats here. So that is the second thing I finished. I did also finish my first People April book, but that will be saved for the vlog. So those are what I finished. What I am in progress with, I just started Excellent Women by Barbara Pym. I'm working on Bored to Death by CJ Connor, my last March Mystery Madness. I started it and then just haven't quite gotten to finishing it. And then the other two that I have talked about before, and I'm still in progress with, Jane Eyre and Fall or Dodge in Hell by Stevenson. So those are going. Then onward to what I watched this week. I have watched many things all over the place, but the thing I finished this week was yet another Harlan Coben. I'm really just devouring the Harlan Coben adaptations. So I watched Fool Me Once, another Netflix adaptation, because they have a whole bunch of those. And this one I think I was really mixed on. It was very, not because any of it was like consistently bad. I think it was that the things I liked, I really liked, and the things I didn't like, I really strongly didn't like. So it's almost in the running for one of my favorites, and also in the running for my least favorite of the adaptations. Mainly, I think what I didn't like is that military is a really prominent element of this, though it's British military, but the main character is this woman who was former combat, and then a whistleblower leaked something that she did that was wrong. And so a major portion of this is trying to find out what that leak is, and also that there's something that he held back and didn't release entirely, and she's under threat of that. And like, she's such a strange person because she's like she's very like into the role of being in the military and loved being in combat and is all the time talking about that, and it surrounds herself with military people who are very much like a boys club, even though she is this like tiny, petite, pretty lady. She's surrounded with the military dudes a lot of the time. And her brother, I think, strikes me as, like, he seems very Jersey Shore, though, again, British. I'm not sure what the comparison to Jersey Shore is, but, like, he's that kind of guy with the very slicked back hair. Yeah, I don't know. But they have a certain vibe, and that I feel distrustful of, definitely. And the other side, it feels like, is this really nuanced, deep story where her husband has died and been killed, and he is from this really wealthy family that have maybe a deep insidious past, and he has died, and then she sees him in a nanny cam video, and she starts trying to unravel that. And a couple of things that are really strange have happened around her in recent times before that. And so you're unraveling that, and the way that played out in the end was, wow, it was just so good. I thought it was fantastic, but so much along the way was just really not working for me. And going back to the character and person that she is really was very frustrating, because she keeps assaulting people in the process of investigating what's going on. She keeps not working with the police. And that was very, very frustrating. I also didn't like the actors as much as many of the other series that I watched. This one, I think I didn't really know hardly anyone except, of course, Richard Armitage, who was great, but he was her dead husband. So he's not massively prominent, though he is present in flashbacks and whatnot. So I think this one was very mixed for me, though I continue to enjoy everything Harlan Coben just because it's so consumable and really entertaining. And I think that's it for all of my reading and media for the week. Otherwise, my week was good. It was a very typical week. I did my hair. It's a little shorter and dyed. And I did my taxes. Yay. I think that's always like a weight off, even though I had very uncomplicated taxes this year. It was straightforward and I got it done in a single day. So I'm happy with that. I went to an author event this week with Sarah Beth Durst. A couple of my friends, we had actually read The Spell Shop for my book club a few months back, and then I found out she was coming here, and it was wonderful, perfect timing. So a couple of my friends and I all went together and really enjoyed seeing her. She talked a lot about fluffy animals, and that was really fun, and cats and guinea pigs and just the general love of animals. And it was not a very focused or sales pitchy type of tour event, because this was for her new book launch, The Faraway Inn, which is also a very cozy fantasy, but this one is a YA. And actually, it seems like this one may be even more my thing than The Spell Shop was. So I'm looking forward to trying it out. But yeah, I enjoyed the event so much. And otherwise, I think that's been about my week. Weather remains very strange. It is finally got to the point where I had to turn on my air conditioning. Unfortunately, I think I mentioned last week that it was very hot, but it was staying at the point where we didn't have humidity. This week we've got some rain, and so it finally got humid and was just not bearable to stay with the AC off. So I managed through the day and then had to turn it on for a little bit before bed to get cool enough to sleep. And then the temperatures cooled down because we had like a squall line, a big storm line across the middle part of the southern Midwest. And that was nasty, but thankfully, I think the worst of it was a little north of me. And so nothing terrible hit here other than branches coming down and stuff. And I think that's been about it for my week. It's been the usual. So with that, let's go to my recommendation for the week. I have a channel I recently subscribed to and consistently is putting out a lot of videos and everyone I really, really enjoy, but I want to focus on this one particular video because it is so good and very reminiscent of a lot of stories that we know and love of people corresponding with bookshops. But this is a story from Kat of Background Book Babble, and Kat started corresponding with Folger Press. I think Folger that do the editions of Shakespeare, famously, like I think if you saw them you would know them, and was trying to get them shipped to the island of Ibiza, where Kat is located. And so that's a whole journey. And this video is Kat telling the story of that happening. And it's just really lovely and wonderful, and one of those bookish connections, I think. So definitely check that out and check out any of Kat's videos. It amazes me that Kat has only like 20 subscribers. It is a fairly new channel, but not that new, and very consistent, very high quality, though it is purely just sitting down and talking about books and stuff. And that's the kind of thing I love personally. But also, you should check out Kat's channel because the backdrop is wonderful. I think this particular video is filmed in a slightly different spot, but most of the videos are filmed surrounded with cats around, and also hedgehog houses, as well as the backdrop of the seashore off the coast of Ibiza, Spain, where Kat is filming from. And it is just gorgeous. And that's most of the videos. It's beautiful there. I've never been, but would love to. It's so pretty. So definitely go check out Kat's channel and the video. Anyway, with that, I think I will leave you to it. I hope you have a wonderful week in reading and in life, and thank you so very much for watching.